For many, the Caribbean is paradise. The place to get away and forget your worries. Beautiful tropical islands cushioned by the sea, constantly touched by sunshine, with miles of soft sandy beaches. But in 2017, paradise was lost for a few of these gems. With 49 million people in Irma's path, the Category 5 storm made landfall on northeast Caribbean islands first, in the late hours of September 5th, affecting Antigua and Barbuda, Anguilla, the British Virgin Islands, St. Bart's, St. Martin, and the US Virgin Islands.
You can see essentially the same thing from the British Virgin Islands and Anguilla southward towards really hard-hit areas like Dominica and Barbuda, that the devastation from these hurricanes is writ large on the faces of these islanders. Now, the governments have moved swiftly to try to lift their economies to help everyone, but individuals are not getting the aid that they need. The blue tarps tell the entire story of people unable to fix even their own homes. They've been out of work for months, they simply don't have the money. The urgency is there. People need help now, and they need it not only from governments, but they need it from private donations as well.
Barbuda was decimated, and with no phone lines, no electricity, the only hospital damaged and not functional, no airport access, 50% of homes destroyed, and others all damaged and uninhabitable.
So the government has, certainly in Antigua, the government has gone a long way in rebuilding the infrastructure, the public utilities there and so on. You know, that has been engaged directly already. But in terms of the individual person, the individual member of the community there, that's where the problems lie. You know, moving from having your house completely destroyed to having a new home. And if you look at footage, it looked like a lawnmower had passed over the island and simply cut down everything. I think there were 2 buildings left standing, the hospital and the secondary school, 2 buildings alone, and they were gutted inside. It was not like they were, you know, usable. They were completely gutted. It's just the concrete structure stood. Everything else, everything, all the water, everything was gone. The generator destroyed the electricity there, the water system, everything was gone.
How do you reignite people's interest? I mean, everyone considers this a faraway paradise, and they think of it that way. And yet it's still in the throes of massive destruction. And it needs outside help, but people have, and understandably, months have passed, they've lost interest. How do you reignite that?
To me, that I think in most world disasters, anywhere in the world, it's the same issue. It's after a period, the immediate relief, people really are concerned, and a lot comes to support people initially. There's a long-term rebuilding and so on, where the problems always lie.
Getting news from the islands was literally like time standing still in deafening silence. Recovery needs in Antigua and Barbuda were estimated at $222 million.
One of the problems affecting Antigua and Barbuda, even prior to the hurricane, and most small island states, is the issue of a very large debt overhang. So what will happen in essence is that the recovery costs of Barbuda would have compounded that problem. In fact, the recovery cost is estimated at about $222 million. So for a small island state, that is about 100% of our recurring tax revenue. Admittedly, the recovery in Barbuda has been slow, primarily because of a lack of sufficient financial resources to meet the recovery needs. I mean, we'll utilize whatever domestic resources we can muster to recover. And at the same time, we are seeking the assistance of the international community to raise additional funds to supplement the funds that are provided by my government. I have to admit that that has been also a difficult task. Whereas pledges were made, many of those pledges have not turned into cash. However, we're not necessarily waiting. We continue to do whatever we can to address the issues. So for example, we have now restored electricity to Barbuda. Water has been restored as well. And we have repaired a number of homes.
In the affected islands, the livelihood of the population? All gone. Agriculture and fisheries halted. And tourism the main income earner, taken away in one night. Irma then spiraled up and left its path of treachery in Puerto Rico, Cuba, parts of the Dominican Republic, and Haiti. There were many responders who were prepared for this, United Nations, UNICEF, and UNDP included. And while the recovery efforts began after Irma, the islands were unprepared for what came next. Hurricane Maria.
With winds reaching 250 kilometers an hour, Maria's first victim, the island of Dominica.
At 9:35 p.m. on September 18th, the first Category 5 hurricane on record to strike the island of Dominica made landfall. With wind gusts of 160 miles per hour, Maria left 31 people dead, 35 missing, and 90% of homes damaged. 80% of the population was affected, with total losses of about $1.3 billion. With no electricity and limited communication, getting information was also a challenge.
The scale of this is just impossible to get your head around. This was the main road to Point Michelle from the capital, and I mean, just look at it.
Do the nations that cause the release of carbon into the atmosphere, do they owe something to Dominica? You are a bit of the canary in the coal mine when it comes to global warming.
Right.
You are the symbol of what happens.
Right.
And we see it here earlier than we see it in other places.
We are on the front line of a war of climate change, which we did not start, and we are powerless to stop. The problem with that for us in the Caribbean is that we are so vulnerable. So, for example, Dominica, Hurricane Maria, one storm, wiped out 226%, the equivalent of 226% of our GDP. Tropical Storm Erica, which impacted us in 2015, that's 2 years before, wiped out the equivalent of 90% of our GDP. The entire country was affected. All the roads were impassable, communities were cut off. Funds had to be found to clear the roads, to bring relief to people. They had no access to water, they had no access to food. Just the significant amount of money spent to address that at a time when the country is earning nothing at all, no revenue is coming in. And even now, because so many businesses have been affected, the revenue that the government can collect is significantly reduced. In relation to overseas development assistance, many of the countries of the Caribbean have been graduated out of concessional financing. The reason being we are listed as either high income or high middle income countries, and therefore we do not qualify for grant or concessional financing overseas development assistance. What we advocate for is for there to be a vulnerability index that applies to us. So you look at all of the things, not just the GDP per capita, but you look at the special vulnerabilities that face our countries and use that as the yardstick instead of the GDP per capita.
Maria weakened slightly after crossing Dominica, but soon achieved its peak intensity over the eastern Caribbean. Maximum sustained winds of 175 miles per hour, that's 280 kilometers an hour, making it the 10th most intense Atlantic hurricane on record. By the time Maria hit Puerto Rico on September 20th, it downgraded to a Category 4 storm and finally dissipated by September 28th. There was an urgent need for Dominica, the only Caribbean island damaged in the furor that is considered to have no mother country. Relief from neighboring islands began, and one of the forerunners in the effort was Living Water Community and the Mercy Foundation.
Rhonda, what is the Living Water Community? What kind of work do you do?
Living Water Community is a Catholic charismatic organization. We've been operating for the last 40 years, and we have many ministries for the poor, homes for HIV/AIDS patients, hospice for dying patients. We have for boys off the streets and for children who have been abandoned.
After Irma hit on Dominica, you then saw Maria bearing down. What were your thoughts at the time as this hurricane gathered strength?
But I remember when I saw David 30 years ago, what David did, it was a shambles. And I mean, I couldn't believe it could ever stand up again. And the experience of it, of course, was not as bad as Maria, but it was devastating in those days, absolutely devastating. And at that stage, I wondered, can this country ever survive again? So the same thought, of course, came to my mind as I visited Dominica this time. However, where there's life, there's hope. And if the people come together, the people of Dominica, the people of the Caribbean, the people of the world come together, we can make a big impact. And I think we can begin a new Dominica, a resilient Dominica. It was amazing to see the participation and the desire by the public of Trinidad and Tobago. Not only the business section, but also the ordinary people on the streets and the schools and the organizations around. People were just willing to help when they saw the devastation of Maria.
What is it going to really take for these rebuild efforts to work?
I remember knowing always that the housing, they were not built for hurricanes. And we can't be in a hurricane zone and not build for hurricanes. I think this is an opportunity now to change that. So whatever is rebuilt would be rebuilt to sustain a hurricane.
Nigel, I think we have to begin at the beginning. What is the Mercy Foundation?
The Mercy Foundation was founded about 11 years ago, and the goal of the Mercy Foundation is to support the poor and vulnerable throughout the Caribbean region.
How well were you able to bring together the international as well as the regional relief efforts?
We started looking at all the various international organizations at that time, reaching out to them, finding out what they were doing and seeing how we could collaborate with them. But locally, a lot of the multinational companies, they came together with the local companies and living water community and started this massive mobilization to get relief supplies to the islands.
As chairman of the Mercy Foundation, what's your hope for the future of these Caribbean islands?
I think what we need to do is to build climate resilience communities. Talking to the chief of staff in Antigua, he was making some salient points, saying that eventually, we will have to change the model. And I think because of climate change and what is happening in the international community with the weather patterns, etc., is you need to have climate resilience zones set up so that we could withstand these natural disasters.
Regional business leaders also picked up the mantle to help in the rebuild effort. Alongside its Caribbean cousins, and also severely damaged, was the British Virgin Islands. Hurricane Irma created havoc, with damage estimated at $3.6 billion and the entire population affected.
The people of the British Virgin Islands have really shown a lot of resiliency here. They still have optimism. What keeps them going after a crisis like this? You witnessed it yourself.
Well, this is home. And although it's a small place, it is home. It's a beautiful place. We've always been proud of the BVI and what we've done so far, how it's grown so far, to the efforts of those who went before us, to the efforts of the investors who come to work with us. And we want to, and we have every confidence that it can be rebuilt even better and stronger.
What many people outside of the damaged islands don't realize is that these islands are still trying to rebuild. But another hurricane season is almost upon them. The risk of life and loss of loved ones is a fear that cannot be erased.
I lost 2 girls in the hurricane.
From here?
Yeah, right here. My first daughter died right here. The river came down and we had a shop here with some cabins. That was what came down. And my baby, she slipped out from my hand right there because I went out there and she went up. Every time it rains, like it just brings everything back.
Hope and belief that life will get better is the only consolation.
I experienced the storm. It was between life and death. But at the beginning, I watched the sea because I live close to the sea, And it's the very first time that the sea ever reached up to my house. in all this time I passed David right there and nothing happened that much. But this one I got wind, I got rain, I got seawater. The seawater took everything I had inside the house. My roof went, but eventually, with friends' help, I put back on a roof, semi. But I have no doors, no windows, what I'm living in. I got a little few pots, but I had no stove, thanks to a lady that is giving me 3 meals a day. But God is in control. He is the one that will, ready, because I give up everything to Him. I applied to the government. I don't know how it will turn out, or whatever will be. We cannot go through anything without God being at the helm of everything. Because if He say no, He's no. If He say yes, He's yes. And when He say no, He say no. No one can change that.
Makeshift classrooms become a mental escape for stories of despair and death.
After the hurricane, when I heard how badly this village got hit, my students came to mind, and it was quite heartbreaking learning that 2 of my students died during the hurricane. They went away with their family, and I was worried that how would the other students focus, how would they cooperate in the classroom now. However, when we returned to school, I returned in 2 minds, like, are we ready, are we not ready for this? But when we came and I saw their smiles and I saw how happy they were, that melted my heart to know that there is some joy in this.
If you had one wish, what would that be?
I wish that Hurricane Peril never happened. I wish everybody still had their house and everything was safe and back to normal.
While Hurricane Maria was striking, I was thinking about my house in the south, and my house wasn't that strong, so I thought it would go down flat.
When I came to the school and I saw the devastation, most of our buildings here were destroyed. One of the things that I was asked was, how are we going to build? What's going to happen? And I had to encourage my staff. I had to say to them, don't worry, the Lord will provide. The Lord will help us. And before long, I was told by Bishop Malzer that the Living Water community will be seeing to the repair of 6 of our buildings. I think that was the greatest news that our staff, students, and even myself that we heard. We were just so happy and so thankful. And before long, we had the engineer here looking at the school, and he told us that a team will be coming from Trinidad to have the work done. That was great news, because it's one thing for us to have the materials, another thing to get people to do the work. They brought us hope. They brought joy to our heart. There's something for us to look forward to. One day we'll have our roof. Everything will be all right, And so I'm very, very grateful to them. And this is the hope that we live with every day, that things are going to be well, and that God is in control and He will let things happen for us.
Homes, buildings, schools, hospitals, none of these in the Caribbean were built or designed for monster Category 5 hurricanes. The continued input and advice of experts are very necessary.
Ronald, do you think that anybody truly understands, on the outside, understands what has happened here, the extent of...
No, I don't think so. I don't think the outside will really understand what has really happened here. And when you see the destruction, what has happened here, it really amazed. It really amazed me as a contractor to see what has happened, what has truly happened here. As you've noticed, the repair works that we are doing here, we are introducing a new system, which is steel frame, metal screws, metal framing. This roof right over your head, as you look at it, you will see it's all timber and galvanized, which is the standard type of things they do in this country. These timbers, it's not going to happen. Because if you look at what is happening right now in the country, you're going to see most of the roof are covered with tarpaulins. because the people need a place to shelter. So what you find is that they will do whatever temporary measure that is necessary for them to move back in.
So there's no preparing. I mean, there's no putting in a couple of extra nails before the storm hit.
But that is the problem. The problem is with the manner in how they use for fixing the sheeting. They use galvanized nails. We live in this Western Hemisphere under what they call a rainy season, a dry season. So you get expansion and you get contraction. But when you have rain, the rain penetrates underneath that nail and it creates what they call a soft spot where that nail is. Now, when you have a heavy wind pressure, the nail could be lifted off. Now, when the nail is lifted off, you have that gap between the nail and the galvanized.
And that little space becomes a sail
exactly.
for the hurricane wind.
Exactly. But when you use a roofing screw now if you look at a roofing screw, you will see that a roofing screw has what they call a rubber washer. And that rubber washer picks up the little contraction and expansion.
Let me ask you this, Renaud. It doesn't seem like it's that much more expensive to use the right tools, to use the right pieces to put this together. So there are some practical things that won't cost much money and could save some homes.
Exactly. And that is what we're saying. That's what we are here for. You do it right the first time.
It's important that the rebuild effort becomes a cause of many through continued donations, expertise, and manpower. The cooperation of many is needed to keep the islands going as they not only rebuild, but work toward preparing for another hurricane season.
What do you see as the biggest challenges facing Anguilla in the days and the months ahead?
Well, obviously, we are an economy that's based on tourism. Tourism drives our economy. Obviously, our tourism plant has been seriously affected. As a consequence, that impacts our entire economy. Jobs, the number of persons work in the tourism sector, maybe 25% of the employed persons work either directly or indirectly in the tourism sector. It's an existential threat to our region. Of course, Anguilla is a low-lying place. The highest point in Anguilla is 219 feet. Our beaches are, of course, on the coastline, and as the sea level rises, more of the lands are taken over, and the waters encroach on those resources that we sell and that we exploit for tourism purposes, our main industry.
The memories of the devastation still linger in the backdrop of the rebuild efforts.
During the storm, I had the neighbors, I had my mom come over, we all settled in the drawing room area right there. Unfortunately, I told my family and the neighbors, let's get out from the living room area to go into the hallway. So the hallway was right in that area. Okay? Here comes a landslide, just hit the house. Torchlight scattered from my hands. We were all in darkness. We were all covered in debris. I was somewhere here covered. Well, afterwards, the guys, we had 6 guys, lift this up. The reason why, we had a cancer patient in there who was stuck for about 17 hours. We had my dead mom right here in that area. So before we could even get to the cancer patient, we had to dig out my mom. All right, after we dig out my mom, I get some assistance from some guys. We dug her out and I put her right by the door. I covered her and then I left her there. There's a little girl called Sarah. She was dug up. She was dug up somewhere underneath there. And I went to the authorities. The authorities tell me, try and get help. I don't know how that was possible. I went to the radio station. I said it for the whole nation to hear. Nobody assisted me. Unfortunately, I had to bury my mom right there. Okay, there's a lot of grass, so you won't see it clearly. Actually, after my mom was so heavy, so we had to put her on a galvanage, and then we had to make a ramp, and then slide her down. When we slide her down, she was so heavy, she kind of tilt over. So we made a bridle for her leg, and then we put her in the hole, and then I started to I went nuts from there. Life, what can I say?
The support of organizations such as the UN, UNICEF, Living Water Community, and the Mercy Foundation has made a difference so far. But a daunting challenge still remains, with massive amounts of work to be done. Rebuilding homes, schools, hospitals, crops. Restoring clean water distribution systems, electricity, and proper roads. If you are from the Caribbean and now living outside the region, you may share the sentiments of individuals like Barrington Irving, who held the world record in 2007 for the youngest pilot to do a solo flight across the globe.
I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and eventually moved to the United States. The reason why this effort really strikes a chord with me is because I'm a son of the Caribbean, and this means a lot to be able to provide other islanders with hope as well as inspiration. Inspiration gets not only a community but a country going in the right direction. When you see in someone's eyes an essence of doubt or hopelessness, or even the inability to want to continue life in the way in which they had before, it really humbles you as a person to understand why this work is significant. There are so many people, whether rich or poor, a hurricane doesn't care how rich you are, how poor you are, or whatever the case may be, right? But one of the things it does, it causes a community to come together more strategically in order to build sustainability.
Certainly it's not complete. I mean, we can be there for years to come with the work that is to be done. It's an ongoing process. It's a long-term process. We are in for the long haul. We want to do this with Category 5 strength with the houses that we are building. It takes a lot of money for that. I mean, each house is going to average at about $40,000 or $45,000 US. And so funding for that is a big challenge.
Natural disasters have become a part of life in the Caribbean. We cannot allow them to happen year to year and continue doing the same things. We have to look at the way we build houses. We have to look at where we build relative to the coastline. It's how we look at the whole response to global climate change, how we utilize renewable energies, how we look at the world in a slightly different way in order to embrace what the world would look like in the future. For Shell Trinidad and Tobago, one of our core strategic elements is to be a force for good. And therefore, it's a core strategic element of the wider Royal Dutch Shell Group. And therefore, in this case, this is what we are doing. And we will always reach out to our neighboring islands to provide assistance when necessary going forward into the future.
Food security is a major concern for small, vulnerable island states. In conjunction with recovery efforts by Dominica's Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, the IICA, and the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, CARDI, the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization is assisting with the recovery of the agricultural sector. Despite the trials, perseverance is the mantra of the day. People working together and outsiders showing they care creates hope. Influencers, movers and shakers are hoping too that more people will give support and help in the rebuild effort.
We must stand with the Barbudans, Barbuda and the Barbudans. The recovery process will be a long, hard road. Barbudans must be a part of it. Their homes repaired stronger, rebuilt stronger, new homes stronger, the immediate needs, power, water, food, medical care, animals sheltered must be met. The kids need to go to school. There must be a hospital, an airport, a seaport, roads, fire services, communications. Every need you can think of must be restored to Barbuda. Working together with all of you, Barbuda can rise to stronger and be more resilient.
Everywhere we traveled throughout the Caribbean, looking at those islands hardest hit by the hurricanes of 2017, it's very clear that there is urgent need for more help. The hydrocarbons that created these storms and propelled them are certainly coming from industrialized, wealthy nations. They did not originate here in the Caribbean.
In one sense, you can say it is very unfair. But in the meantime, what matters most is that people are willing to stand in, to give the people of the Caribbean a chance.
The rebuild needs the effort, concern, and assistance of many, many more to save an island, a culture, a people. That's why crowdfunding has been a major aspect of the rebuild efforts. It's a race to restore the Caribbean islands, to rebuild it before another mega monster hurricane hits.